All right, y'all. What's up? What's up? Hey, you know what it is? It's on the internet. Um, I'm Toby. This is Laura. And if you don't know what other internet is, that's okay. We'll explain it. We're an applied research organization, and we pursue our own self-initiated research, and then we consult with organizations and like apply that research through narratives, primitives, governance work. So you might have heard of headless brands or squad wealth. That stuff originated from our self-initiated research. And we're going to talk to you about this new initiative that we have going on, which is about off-chain governance and social infrastructure. Um, we started this project a few months ago, and yeah, we're going to tell you about it now.
So let's begin by taking a look at the evolution of thinking around governance in the history of blockchain. So beginning with Bitcoin and its clone, Ethereum, and most other layer ones, focused specifically on automated consensus mechanisms that maintain the validity and security of the ledger by means of defaulting to the longest chain. So they did not incorporate human decision making in the blockchain itself. And this philosophy became known as governance minimization. So since then, the space has evolved with smart contracts, DeFi, and DAOs, and we've also seen new funding models that leave significant treasuries at the discretion of stakeholders. And so because of these trends, the topic of governance itself has become more relevant. With the rise of governance tokens, there has been a significant emphasis on voting, whether on-chain or off-chain, as the primary focus on governance. And particularly with DAOs, we've seen the introduction of off-chain social tooling. There is now an emerging stack primarily composed of a Discourse forum, Discord, and Snapshot off-chain voting. But we believe that voting isn't everything. So this is an overview of our off-chain governance research, and our core thesis is that the less formalized processes that occur in the social environments where communities meet and discuss deserve as much attention as formal voting systems. The conversational infrastructure that structures interactions and organizes discussions is crucial to create the conditions for ideas to circulate and develop in official proposals, eventually triggering an on-chain vote. And also the informal exchanges that occur through these channels and interfaces are instrumental in attracting and identifying key stakeholders and contributors that otherwise would not be taken into account in the more formal governance mechanisms, for instance, for not having enough tokens to meaningfully participate in voting.
So how are we actually doing this research? Well, we start with just deep lurking, doing ethnographic lurking in discords, forums, and identifying the key community members and how they're contributing. We do a series of stakeholder interviews with the core community members and core team, and try to foreground the kind of hidden dynamics that aren't part of the formalized processes that lead up to a vote. And the first two projects that we've looked at are Uniswap and Pool Together. We published our Uniswap report maybe a month and a half ago, and we're writing up our report on Pool Together now. So we're going to tell you some of our findings from those two projects. Uniswap and Pool Together are very, very different communities. Even they're both in DeFi. They launched not that far apart from one another, but they're very different in size. Uniswap has 275,000 token holders, and Pool Together has 8,000 token holders, so about 3%. And roughly quite different numbers of Discord members as well. But they both did a retroactive airdrop. They both use the Discord forum snapshot stack, They both talk about doing progressive decentralization. That's the process that they identify themselves as doing. And while Uniswap has had 8 governance proposals, only about half of which have passed, Pool Together has had 23 governance proposals, almost all of which have passed, and some of them are actually rolled up P-tips, which is their equivalent to the EIP process. So going into what makes the Uniswap community unique. The Uniswap community is inspired particularly by Ethereum's approach. In terms of the simplicity of the protocol, it's similar to mining or staking. You have LPs contributing capital to pools, and they earn a governance token based on that. And so theoretically, you should be able to just have that be similar to base layer governance. And Uniswap and their core team have kind of adopted that as their methodology for dealing with their community. So they're super hands-off and don't give the community direction, and have largely left developers and Discord community members and governance forum members to their own devices to figure out what's valuable to build. However, this is complicated with the addition of the Treasury, because the Treasury is an explicitly community-governed thing. So you have 2 approaches, this governance minimization approach and the actual need to manage the Treasury. And in practice, that means that there hasn't been enough social scaffolding to get that Treasury capital deployed. So here are a few examples of that. For one, while there's the full forum, there's not a lot of governance activity happening in the Discord. There's a governance channel, but because of the token distribution, the people who actually have the power to push through proposals don't need to get the support of other users, so they're not very active in the Discord promoting ideas. A second factor is the Discord has kind of been allowed to become a support-oriented place. When the airdrop happened, there was a massive need for support, and a bunch of community members were hired on. Those community members were already contributing, which is what you would think you would want, but because they were specifically helping around support, their form of community management is providing support, helping with spam bots, answering technical questions. So there's no governance activity or governance-specific focused community management happening. And then lastly, there's just like a lack of guidance or leadership in terms of what proposals should actually be put forth to the governance process. So those are some of the outcomes of like taking this kind of hands-off approach to community development, where there's an explicit need to deploy the Treasury and have the community vote on that. Pool Together, however, is very different, and we'll tell you about that next.
So Pool Together takes a very different approach to community from Uniswap. So to begin with, the core team has used Discord as their primary means of communication since the very start, with a diminished use of private channels and increasingly working in public. This has led to an interesting blurring of the lines between core team and community members, with both often answering questions and actively participating in governance discussions. The Pool Together Discord is also a more lively and dynamic place than Uniswap's because moderators and community members are actively encouraged to take initiatives with regard to the structure of the Discord, for instance, starting new conversation or creating new channel, organizing voice calls, and other, and more generally, like taking initiative in the organization of contributors. So one example of this community-led approach is the Swim Team, which was a group formed with the explicit goal to onboard prospective contributors and coordinate community activities. And this later turned into the Pool Grants program, which is another entirely community-led grants program. And the community also initiated the use of Collabland tips and Coordinate to remunerate core contributors in the Discord. Additionally, the decision flow from Discord to forum to official proposal is strongly enforced, and the communication and conversations are thoroughly documented throughout the Discord and also easily accessible. So these design choices have led to very different outcomes. There is a general feeling of wholesomeness and empowerment and positivity in the Discord and in the community, with lots of community members that we interviewed typically joining the Discord out of curiosity and ultimately staying for the vibes. The community also feels empowered to make proposals that usually pass without any controversy, but occasionally some community proposals have diverged from the core team's roadmap. One example of this was the discussions around the PT8, which proposed the creation of an NFT price pool, but which would require a lot of technical build-out. And while the proposal passed, the initiative ultimately failed to gain traction because it lacked the social support of the core team. Then, at the level of compensation and performance, Pull Together is facing questions that are becoming increasingly important to address in the space. There is the lack of processes for DAOs to value heterogeneous contributions. This has important consequences for the community, for instance, impacting the capacity to retain core contributors that, for instance, need to leave being really active in order to accept other jobs, as well as other cases in which contributors were perceived to be overbilling for the work they did. So here tools such as Coordinate are definitely a step forward, but they are still heavily reliant on an informal reputation economy that rewards community members that have already gained influence in the Discord or whose contributions are the most visible. So what are some key learnings and takeaways from this? Particularly at the beginning of, at the early stages of a decentralized community, transparency is not as important as discoverability and accessibility of information. This obviously also depends on the size of the community. For instance, in large communities that are still in formation, such as Uniswap, it is not possible to have key stakeholders conversations transparent to everyone. And here, for decentralization to succeed, the channels and opportunities to facilitate participation and also facilitate the discovery of documenting knowledge and decisions must be created, promoted, and actively maintained. Secondly, autonomous is not the same as leaderless. An autonomous community cannot be created without strong leadership and direction. At the moment of distributing ownership to stakeholders, a project must ask itself what kind of community does it want to have? What should the community orbit around and why? These are key questions and different options require different forms of leadership, advocacy, and community development. Thirdly, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to community governance. Key variables are the funding model, the size of the community, the market cap. What, for instance, works for Uniswap may not necessarily work for Pull Together and vice versa. And lastly, within a process of progressive decentralization, core teams need to have a clear vision for their communities, also to be able to set expectations and clearly communicate their strategies to their key stakeholders.
Word. So when we started this project, our view was like, let's study community management, or what's being called community management, because that's really a form of off-chain governance. It's like the part of governance that affects the community, but it's not covered by voting. But our findings are definitely leading us to ask many, many more interesting questions, such as what is the right model of valuing voluntary participation in a protocol? What even is the purpose of the community that is generated by tokens? Like, why are they there, and how should they participate? What kind of communities are crypto communities in general? And we have seen that they share some similarities with open source communities in terms of they face the same challenges of attracting, onboarding, and managing growing numbers of contributors. They also share properties of fan communities because they rely on participants' self-directed activities to organize and consume information. And also, they're similar to brand communities in which there's a central party that kind of relies on the participatory actions of community members to provide support, peer-to-peer support and maintenance. I think crypto protocols share all of these traits, but we still don't know exactly what these communities are. So to take a step back and talk about like what's next for this research, we have studied 2 protocols. We're doing our second report now, and we're hoping to study 2 more by summer next year. These have already produced a lot of learnings, so keep an eye out for our Pool Together report, which will be coming out in a few weeks. I think overall, one takeaway for all of you is that we see a lot of projects using the same toolkits and language to talk about what they're doing. It's progressive decentralization. It's the same smart contracts, and when that same stack, that same language and like ideological heritage is adopted, some of the conditions that make your specific protocol and culture different are swept under the radar. So it's important to have different vocabulary to talk about these options. If Pool Together is super hands-on with the community and inclusive of participation, and Uniswap's model for participation is very hands-off and mediated through the grants program, are they both progressive decentralization? I'm not sure. I think we just need to get away from the language of autonomy and decentralization for these communities and talk about what they are, which is groups of people organizing to do things with very different qualities, and that will get us closer to the types of conversations that are productive. So this is what we've been working on. If you want to talk about this and like get more in-depth learnings, like please find us. We'll be hovering around here and in Lisbon for like the next few days, and you can follow Laura and I and other internet here. Squad.
Thank you.